So, forex market is all about global markets. It's primarily the global factors which decide forex market, and hence we will start with the global, global markets understanding. So we're just showing you two charts here, Dow Jones and Sensex, and the point here is that both looks broadly the same. Post COVID, during COVID, I mean, just when the COVID started taking its toll in 2020. There was a crash, and then with the stimulus, markets have recovered. There's not much of effect of wave two on the equity market, and not just Dow Jones and Sensex. You can look at other equity markets of the world as well. There is not much of impact of so much of devastation and so much of lockdown, so much of panic. Primarily because Federal Reserve cut their interest rate to zero, which they painfully built up from 2016 till 2019, but they cut it to zero. Okay, and this is not just Federal Reserve. The zero interest rate policy and negative interest rate policy is present everywhere in European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, Swiss National Bank, Bank of England. All of them are having an extremely low interest rate, and some have negative interest rates. Then there's something called a dot plot, with Federal Reserve voting members plot where they see the interest rate. So they are still, this is the last one. It may change a bit after the inflation data. So they are still seeing it on the lower side for quite some time, no hike. So these are the dots, they put dots on the where they see interest rate in the future. And you can see most of the dots are at zero for quite some time. Little bit of dots have started appearing at 0.4%, quarter basis point, 0.5%. That also after 1.5 years. So, so broadly, the expectation is that the rates will not be hiked. However, there are some conundrums which we have to understand and sort out. Most importantly, on top of zero interest rate and zero interest rate expectation for longer time, there are asset purchases which Fed has been doing. They are purchasing around $120 billion of assets every month. I'm sorry, this is not 120 billion a year. It is 120 billion a month. Let me correct that. Okay, $7.83 billion is the balance sheet size as of now, and it's not just Fed. You look at ECB. This blue one is ECB. Fed is this green one. Pink one is Bank of Japan. The only point is that Bank of Japan is the champion of this. They have been doing it for a long time. ECB has been doing it for some time now. When Mario Draghi said whatever it takes, they started this. Fed is the newbie in the game. They have done an extensive amount of asset purchase during this COVID. That's why you see their increase is most significant. ECB's increase is not that much, and Japan's increase is broadly flat. So every central bank is buying assets, which means they're buying bonds and infusing liquidity in the market. So the market is flush with liquidity, with zero interest rates, negative interest rates, and low expectation for long time. So this liquidity, huge amount of liquidity with ZIRF and NIRF, is making markets go up in spite of COVID or any other real problems. And this money is moving everywhere to the real estate. Right now the real estate prices of US is at all-time high. Equity markets across the world, in most of the market, it's all-time high. PE fundings are at peak. M&As are happening. Emerging markets doing well. SPACs are happening. SPACs are like, people are taking risk and investing basically. So this is the most important factor, this liquidity. Whether this liquidity will increase or decrease is what is going to define the market in the coming days. As you know, this is a slide which I can't show officially, but the zero interest rate, negative interest rate, too much of money, low rates, you have dog money. If you have not seen the video of dog money, kindly see it in YouTube. It's a good fun. How they started with a bit of a joke, and now it has good valuation. So Srinivas, you want to add something here at this stage?
Yeah, so broadly, right, this is the one driving factor for the global rallies that people have seen despite COVID and despite everything. Primarily because this kind of liquidity is pumped into the system by all central banks, and unprecedented 120 billion a month from Fed. This money has to find some way, right? I mean, into some of the, if the yield becomes close to zero everywhere, so people will slowly move into risky assets, and that's what started happening from 2008 onwards. And then this has picked up very much in the past 4 or 5 years, and in the context of COVID, just to prevent any further problems, these guys have just gone, multiple times faster than what they had in the past 10 years. So the Federal Reserve, the way they pumped money in the COVID time of 2020, that's much more, much faster than any other printing that they did in the past. So, and then after that, then people thought that, the inflation was never a concern, but in the recent past, inflation started happening slowly. And that is the reason why the 10-year yield shot up, basically. And once a 10-year yield shot up, or as the US yield shot up, people thought that this will go further up. But then Fed has been trying to talk down, all this and said that inflation is transitory and they need not worry about it. It will come back next year down, and so on and so forth. But as the chart shows, there is definitely a slow increase, right? Expect only. I think the amount of money that got printed, I think that is only going to add fuel to the fire. I think there will be definitely not a transitory phenomena. So this is the risk that is facing markets, and also dollar rupee. Rupee also is one of the major beneficiaries of flows into the country, just because of the Federal Reserve's large GC. And now, if they start tapping taper in the next few months, then rupee will definitely be at risk. So that is the base case risk factor for rupee. Yeah. Yes, Amish.
Right. So, that's the risk of tapering, which is there. So if the bond purchase is tapered in US, then you remember last time when the taper tantrum started in 2011, how dollar rupee moved up from 54 to, from 45 to 54, and then 54 to 68. So this time such moves may not happen because the RBI reserves are quite strong. RBI has been decisive, and also the current account deficit is not that high, but certainly 4-5% of move can happen. So we have to keep an eye on US liquidity and US inflation. This is one of the top factor in the world right now. So you have to look at the core CPI, CPI, and the PCE. These are the three numbers which we need to look at, and also the market narratives about the inflation. Because if you talk to residents of USA, many of them say that the real inflation is much higher than what is being shown in the number. So that's what we have to be careful about. Now, let's look at some of the domestic factors. The trade deficit had reached around $15 billion a month level during Jan, Feb, March, April, but in May it has come down to 6.3 billion, primarily because of the lockdown being imposed again and the second wave taking its toll. So we expect as we open up and things become normal, maybe from June or July, things will be again back to around $15 billion a month kind of level. And if oil prices improve and we really are able to open up and people start traveling, we will see an oil bill even swelling further, and we can see a little higher trade deficit. But 15 billion of trade deficit is still manageable. Why it's manageable? See, 15 billion of trade deficit will broadly translate into 60 to 80 billion of annual current account deficit, because the IT and NRI surplus, non-trade surplus for the year, it can be expected to be around $120 billion. So if you have a monthly trade deficit of $15 billion and annual non-trade surplus of $120 billion, net current account deficit is around $60 to $80 billion. Okay. So if we have net current account deficit of $60 to $80 billion, it means that India needs around that much of dollar in a year to keep rupee where it is, to keep rupee stable. So we need that much of dollar. So where will that dollar come from? That has to come from the investment account, from the capital account. So let's look at the FDI. One look at this, have a look at it for the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and you can tell me your estimate of how much do you think it will be in 2021. Minimum, most likely case, conservatively, what will be the range of FDI investments in India in 2021? This is foreign direct investments, where foreigners, putting up factories in India, bringing in money for the M&A, long-term investments, etc. What is your sense? Where do you see it? Yes, please, you can write in the chat box or tell me, where do you see it? This is a table which shows data for the last 10 years. You have to tell me how much you are expecting in the coming year.
Hi sir, good afternoon. This side Umesh. Sir, the average we think it would be around this ranging between 40 to 45 billion of USD, because one cannot say, if as you just mentioned, if tapering start happening, then might be there would be a reverse flow. So whatever investments people have, these NRIs and they have planned, they might stop that investment.
So your case is around 40 to 45 billion dollar. Also, the last year's number had Geo in it. So 54 billion has Geo, 18 billion of Geo.
Right.
So
Yeah. Also, the factors that you mentioned, obviously, then NRI, investment and flows going out, all of them are actually not that relevant to this part. Okay, this is FDI. This is more a business joint venture. This is a permanent flow, factory, setting up a factory in the country, that kind of flow. This is more business driven, and also depends on the government policies, opening up of sectors. This is direct. I mean, it doesn't really. It doesn't really go with the general market fluctuations on a year-on-year basis. That's why this flow is very consistent. Right? It doesn't change much on each year. It's purely government policy and economic optimism that drives these flows. So I just wanted to make that point. All the factors you mentioned around Federal Reserve and everything, they impact the other set of flows, which Samir will point out in the next few slides.
So you can, conservatively estimate, even on a conservative basis, you can say around 40 billion, 35 to 40 billion dollar will certainly come next year. Let's say around 40 billion dollar, because this is broadly a stable flow. So if 40 billion dollar comes and your current account deficit is 70 billion dollar, then your problem is only of 30 billion dollar. Where will the 30 billion dollar come from? Now, for that, you have to look at the FPI, foreign portfolio investors, who put money in equity markets and debt markets. They are not a consistent investors. There are years when foreign portfolio investors will put in money, and there are years when they will take out money. How do they decide where to invest? Right now, there are too much of liquidity. See, these decisions are to some extent also a group decision. The decision to invest in emerging market. It's not just a decision to invest in India. So when foreign large hedge funds allocate capital, they say, okay, we will invest in emerging markets, equity and debt. Within emerging markets, you have Latin America, you have Africa, you have Eastern Europe, you have Asia. So we will allocate 50% in Asia, 25 in Latin, 12.5 each in Africa and Eastern Europe. Then within Asia, you have allocation for China, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. So we will allocate certain amount of money. And when they decrease or increase their allocation to equity or debt, to the asset class or to the emerging market, it is for everyone. So that's one of the reasons why the equity markets move in tandem. So many a times I have seen someone talking about that India is good, why India is getting sold off in a crisis, because it's a group punishment. It's all in a group. Later on, people will do a cherry picking, but at the time of crisis or sell off, no one is going to do a cherry picking. So so this is a flow which moves along with the market sentiment, and we expect, you can see the way the the FPI has been investing. They invested huge amount of money last year. This year it is off, on and off. April was negative, May was negative, June is positive so far, $1.2 billion. So we can expect we have to see how it works. So if there is a crash overseas, then that will impact Indian markets as well. There will be an FPI outflow. and that will, add to the problem of 30 billion. But if the flows come, then that will sort out the flows. Now, if there is a shortfall in FDI and FPI, then the last resort is Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India has to supply the dollar, which they have ample dollar now. Right now the reserve is around actually $598 billion. They have accumulated around $125 billion in the last 1 year, and possibly this Friday the number will be $600 billion. So they can certainly supply around $30-40 billion if there is an outflow or if there is a need. So that's a big comfort which dollar rupee has. I would also like to ask you to look at this 3-year chart for dollar rupee, where USD INR is part of a group of currencies which are like Turkish lira, Brazilian real, Russian ruble, Indian rupee, South African rand. These are the currencies which depreciate on a consistent basis because they have current account deficit, they are high interest rate, they have high inflation, and they are a carry currency. Certainly INR is not, exactly in the bracket of Brazilian real and Turkish lira. They are at a different league altogether. INR, Indonesian rupiah, South African rand are possibly in another league. So this is what you have to keep in mind, that INR is part of a group called BRITS, BRIITS, Brazilian real, Russian ruble, Indonesia, India, Turkey, South Africa. So short term could be an aberration, but there is generally a correction. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. So where do we expect USD INR? We expect to see, if equity market sell-off happens or whenever it happens, we expect a number of around 76, 77. Otherwise, we see a stability around 72 to 74. Annual range we expect between 72 to 78, and the narrower range is more like 73 to 75. We are not expecting rupee to go to 80, 85. We are also not expecting rupee to be sustained at 72 or 71 or 70. That's broad view. So it's a range bound, it's going to be a range play market. And whenever equity cracks, we will see 76, 77, 78 kind of numbers. And overall direction is towards 80, 90. That goes without saying for the 2 to 5 years. That's because fundamentally rupee is a high inflation, current account deficit country, and it's unlikely to change in the next 3-4 years. It takes much more time, like Make in India kind of initiatives will take much longer time to materialize. But if that happens, then possibly we will be able to export more than we import. So this is as far as our view is concerned.
Sir, I have one question. Sir, what is your near-term view mean? Say in another 1 or 2 months.
From here, we expect the range will be between 1 or 2 months. Should be at any point of time, rupee can move around 1.5 to 2 rupees on the upper side. That is towards 74, 75. It will not take more than 4-5 days for it to move. When the move will happen, it will be very fast.
Okay, fine. And what about the premium, sir? Like we see all of a sudden increase in last say 1 month. Right now they have stabilized, but most probable reason, what was I mean, in your view, what was the reason that premium increased so much in a shorter tenor? And what is your view? Mean it is the right time to hedge, or we should wait?
Yeah, that we are coming to in the next few slides.
Okay,
What's
fine.
But as far as the premium is concerned, see, if you look at the real premium, what it should be, then the difference between Indian interest rate and US interest rate is around 4%. So that is the right premium. The premiums were elevated because RBI has been buying in the forward market, and also the banks have been have routed their flows overseas, and
Okay.
they have been making the trades of buying dollar also. So that we don't expect the forward premium to change much going forward. We expect
Okay.
it to remain stable at this stage. So let us come to the our advice. I mean, what we broadly think an exporter and importer should do. Srinivas, you want to add something? so far?
No, not really. The premium part, just to give a sense, it seems RBI bought around $73 billion worth of dollars in the forward market. That happened last financial year, March and so on. And I think they are slowly getting out of those positions now. So the forward premium has come back to the premier levels. And at least in this year, I don't think they will again do it. Closer to the next year end, probably they might look at this again. So that's the way it is. Yeah. And somebody asked a question, where would you see INR in July? I think it's answered, right? I mean, we do expect depreciation more than appreciation from these levels, given the way US inflation and those dynamics are playing out. Now, whether that will 73 half to 74 can be happening, but beyond that, it can happen. But when it happens, it will be very fast. It cannot, it won't be very slow. So our bias is towards the upper side.
So coming to what should you do? Let's first look from the importer's point of view. So if you are an importer, our recommendation is that your hedge ratio should be a bit on the higher side, not medium or not low. You should be well hedged, because whenever there is a move of 1.5, 2 rupees, there will be a panic in the market, and it will not be very easy for you to catch the level at that point of time. So, and right now the possibility of 72 getting broken is not too high, and at any point of time the move on the upper side can happen. Yes, rupee can go to 72 half, 72 40, 30, but the balance is on the higher side. So as an importer, you will not be worse off by having a bit of high hedge ratio. That is what we have been recommending now. Call spreads, you can call spread options are not much useful unless you take a out of the money wide call spread. What is out of the money wide call spread? Out of the money means let's say you buy call at 73 half and or 74, and you sell call at 76 or 77. So wide range and out of the money the protection starts from 74 or 76. That's what is looking still okay. But if you want to start from 73 till 75, that the cost is not too low compared to forward, and hence I would say it makes sense to go for forward, especially for 1, 2, 3, 4 months. For a longer tenor, you can also explore Seagull options, 5 to 9 months kind of tenor. 1 month also, it's giving around 80 paisa kind of protection for zero cost. So how does Seagull work? Seagull work is where you buy call, and sell put. So let's say you buy call at 73, you sell call at 74, and you sell put at 73. So you are protected till 74, and if rupee appreciates, you will get benefit till 73 only. Not much. You can choose the strike. You can make it 72 half. So that can be done. Okay. So Seagull option you can do, and if you're doing it in exchange, if you do not have 500 crores of known net worth, then either you replicate it through plain options and forwards in your own book through delta hedging, which can be done, or else you try to take some position in NSE, where you take around 73 to 74, and on the lower side, I would say not lower than 72 half. But if you're taking Seagull, then monitoring is a must. Let me repeat, monitoring is a must. Very, very important. This is extremely important if you are taking Seagull or call spread or any option for that matter, because you may have to do course correction at some point of time. Also, I would always suggest a company to set up a target, that by hedging, what are you trying to achieve? If you take for import, the target which you can set can be something like this, that if you have been always hedging using a forward, you can say that, okay, compared to that, I will try to save around 3% per annum. So if I pay 4.5% is the forward premium, I want to achieve 1.5 to 2% kind of hedge cost, and I should be happy about it. Similarly, if you are a company which is not into hedging, then you can say, okay, by hedging, that hedging should give me around some benefit. So that can be, let's say, 2% per annum kind of benefit you should get. So you make a target and work towards that. That's one of the things which I see missing in many companies, or I would say most companies. On the export side, yes, please go for plain forward. No, sorry. These are some of the import costs, Seagull costs and call spread costs for August. We will send a link of this video to you. You can have a look at this costs for August. And if you, or rather, if you want uh, any specific idea for any specific date, just write a mail to us, to mail to Mayank. He will be able to send you the some of the option ideas for that date. I think that will be better. So for the exporters, our recommendations are maintain a bit of low hedge ratio. I'm sure you must have hedged decently so far. So now maintain the low hedge ratio. If you are not at all hedged, then do some hedging now at this stage also. But if you are low hedge, it's fine. Try to use those hedges and for some time for your conversions and wait for a better level to hedge. However, if you are forced to hedge, for some reason, then I would suggest you, if you are forced to hedge for some reason, then you can explore range forward. Range forward is a good option. Also, you plain puts are not making sense. Only the range forward options are making sense at this stage. So I would suggest you wait for 74 kind of levels for hedging. But if your hedge ratio is very low, then you'd start hedging now. Very, very low, then 73, 73 half, 74, 75. But if you have high hedge ratio, don't don't bother about hedging as of now. Let it come down to moderate. Again, I would advise that you should make a target. What are you trying to achieve by hedging? Either you are trying to beat your costing rate, so then for every bill you should track the costing rate and then see, or you're trying to beat your annual budget rate, or you're trying to ensure that the hedging brings some benefit to the company. So whatever is your target, you make a target and work towards that, because how you set your target, how the management wants to see, that will determine what your strategy should be. Again, here are some of the forward premiums which are there for dollar and euro. So you can look at it later. I will get into the loan hedging now. So if you have an ECB, the MIFOR has come down a bit. MIFOR has come down a bit. Now you can hedge at a decent level of around 7.29 or etc. If you have a 5-year loan at L plus 150. If your loan is at L plus 200, then the cost will be around 789 or so. And one of the advice we will give you, explore two things to reduce your cost. One, making your payment floating. Generally, when you hedge an ECB, it is a fixed cost at the end. Try to make it floating. Your cost will come down. Also, second suggestion is go for options like call spread. That will help. Call spread works very well for the long term in India. It is shown by the data. If you need your management to be convinced, we can share the data for you, and that can be done. You can avoid LIBOR hedging for now, even though there is a risk of high interest rate, but we don't see it happening for the next 4-5 years, because first the tapering will happen and then only the rate hike will happen, most likely. Okay. Also, you can start preparing for INR to USD loan swaps or INR to Euro GBP loan swap. That brings around 5 to 5.5% kind of cost savings. And on dollar rupee, I would not suggest that you enter now. You enter after a while, but start preparing. This is a good idea which can bring benefit to you. So these are the call spread cost for 5-year. If you take a call spread of 73 to 83, 2.11% is cost compared to a forward of 4.69. So within your swap, you'll see 2.5% of benefit if you take this option, or you can design the call spread the way you want. So that's all we have. Srinivas, you want to add something?
Well, sure. See, basically, to summarize, right? I mean, we our at least the current worldview, we think that importers are better served by using option hedges rather than doing forwards. Primarily because even though there could be a depreciation, the forward premium is still on the higher side, as in though it has stabilized, it is still high enough, and you might not get the depreciation of rupee equal to forward premium, at least in the next few months. But of course, it can change. So given that, we prefer doing the call spreads and seagulls and that kind of protection with a clear monitoring in mind. So it's more of a dynamic strategy rather than simply a forward static strategy. And for exporters, as Samir was pointing out, given the fact that there could be potential for more depreciation in the global setup, given the global setup, things like range forwards might work. At least some part of the portfolio can be range forwards instead of just having forwards. And for loans, I mean, clearly loan hedging actually, long-term loan hedging especially has a clear benefit if you use option structures, because loan hedging with forwards or currency swaps and so on is a very costly affair. And historically speaking, to give an example, from 2003 to 2020, for the past 17 years, rupee has moved probably by 28 rupees, whereas the forward premium is around 57 rupees. So effectively it means is that if you continuously keep hedging using a forward for an importer or a loan, it's a losing proposition because rupee does not depreciate as much as the forward premium indicates. So the same, and that is more truer for long-term loan hedging, because loan hedging, instead of paying 4 or 5% cost and unnecessarily giving up a lot of money on the table, it's better to use call spreads and to save at least 1.5-2% of cost easily by managing with call spreads. And historically, rupee 15-20 rupee kind of protection actually is very good for loan hedging, and especially call spreads, like for example spot to spot plus 20, you can do those with the 1.5-2% cost saving. And even from an accounting perspective, people who go for hedge accounting and so on and so forth, those cases also can be, hedge accounting also can be looked at for a call spread. People have done it in the past. So I think loan hedging is where a lot of optimization can be done with call spreads. For imports, as I said, seagulls and those kinds of structures actually make sense in this current environment, especially when rupees is reasonably range bound within a rupee or 1.5 rupees kind of a band. It's a very good thing to do a call spread rather than a forward and unnecessarily pay the cost. Right. So broadly, this is what the summary of whatever Samir was discussing till now.
I have a question. This is Dipti over here about the INR outlook. So while I understand that a depreciation is expected moving forward, and if not depreciation, a stability around 72. But in previous instances, when there was this a lot of liquidity available in the market, INR had been stable or in an appreciating bias for more than 20-25 months in continuation. So if this kind of trend repeats again, then we do not see INR going anywhere around 77, so in the next 1 year or so. And at that time around, our FX reserves were also not that strong, or our other positions are also not that strong. Still rupee remained in an appreciation bias. So what's your take on that?
Okay. Yeah, so what you're talking about is the 2016 kind of a year where rupee was appreciating. It appreciated from 68 to 64, and it remained there for almost a year or more than a year, right? Now that was a time when there were a lot of flows coming in, and India was doing quite well, and India came out of demonetization, that kind of stuff. So that period is when this happened. Yeah. Right? Now, see, the point is, the reason why we are saying that scenario might not be possible for rupee right now is because the global flow situation, while right now it is liquidity driven, a lot of liquidity will continue to happen. Two reasons why we say this. One, the situation is at least looking to turn, in the sense that till now inflation was never a concern. Now this is the first time in the past at least 10 years where inflation is actually becoming a concern. So that's a major risk factor for central bank money printing. Now, when that happens, even a small increase in inflation and persistent inflation could create issues to central banks. And even if they start tapering money, the markets can very quickly react. So that's the first point. Second point is that the equity valuations across the world, because of this free money, given the economic growth versus the equity valuations have look at any equity market in the world, what it was pre-COVID, before March 2020, and what it is now, you are seeing at least 20-30% jump everywhere.
Right.
Now, whereas the economy actually went the other way. Economy actually has a degrowth of 8-10%. Right now, people now are showing the fact that corporate earnings are going to reverse very quickly in the next 1 year or so. There'll be huge growth in corporate earnings. That's true, but then the corporate earnings dipped significantly. The economy collapsed significantly, right? So, if you look at like to like from that time, the economy is nowhere, but markets are 20-30% up. So the point is that this easy liquidity has created a lot of bubbles in various markets around the world. So the risk of a sharp up move is always there compared to a short term move. So net, what I'm trying to say is globally the situation is turning. Like last few years, it is turning. Second, our view is also based on the way RBI has been behaving. So RBI, wants to keep rupee liquidity going in the system. So they're not shying away from absorbing all the dollar inflows that is coming to India and replacing them with rupees. Basically, by buying dollars, they're pumping rupees in the system, and they're happy with doing that because economic growth needs that kind of liquidity. So that's their concern is not really inflation yet, so they're okay with that. And also that because there are so many reserves already going, RBI's accounting of their own capital also means that they cannot afford too much of a rupee appreciation, so that their economic capital also could get hit. So that is probably one of the reasons why people say that RBI went into the forward market in 21 March, primarily because they did not want to show those reserves in the spot market and increase their asset base, and capital impact could hamper them. So they moved into forward market. What I'm trying to say is that's a factor for RBI, how their own capital is looking like. So given all this, I think they would not let rupee appreciate too much. Right. And so these are the two factors which mean that rupee might not be on a sustained appreciation path. And we think that the bias is more towards depreciation. And, see, put it this way, in COVID time, there's so much liquidity got printed, right? Then why did rupee still move back from 72 to 78 just because there was a COVID situation in India? Because of that sentiment at the end of the day. And people think that at least the flows will not come to India per se, right? Though there is global liquidity. So the point is liquidity might happen, but there could be periods where liquidity might stop into the country. Even now, the FII flow into India, there was great FII flow in 2020, significant, right? $30 billion happened in equity. Now, right now, that is not looking, this year has been fairly neutral. It's almost zero FII flow. So despite the fact that, even if you pick up 1 billion a month, it's 12 billion, not much compared to last year. So because the global inflation situation, in US yields going up, all of these are factors playing into the rupee flows into India. So net, I think both global and local, we think it's not a great time for rupee appreciation.
Okay. Thank you.